yeah, enjoy. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Howard.
Oh, Paul, thank you very much. So just a special, Di asked me how my day has been, and I said, very rocky. And that's predominantly because I chose to challenge myself today in terms of Paul Krubler is doing a master data course. And we spoke last night about data quality. And one of the things we spoke about were some of the SQL scripts in terms of being able to profile your data. So I had put together a whole system several years back in terms of building a data quality framework. And I decided to resurrect those scripts and then actually apply it to some of the data that I'm importing and battling with at the moment with one of my customers. So I went through the whole process of getting that right. And then Di Joseph also really stimulated me last week, where she put data quality in the middle of the circle. And that got me to thinking all sorts of thoughts. And during our master data course, when we were talking about data quality, one of the big things we asked and we discussed last night was, how do we apply the data quality dimensions to things like master data, BI, or data modeling, data architecture, data governance? So how do we take those dimensions and not just keep them to ourselves when we profile data, but how do we apply them and how do we make them work in the other knowledge areas? So just as a quick example to give you guys some background, when you're looking at identifying your system of records in master data, I'm hoping everybody knows what that's all about. I will introduce a little bit further. If not, please attend the course prepared by Paul. But if you want to identify a source, you got to make sure that that source is reliable and that source is trustworthy, right? So we don't want a source that is going to let us down. It's not going to be timely. It's not going to be accurate, because then will anyone trust that authoritative source? If it's sourced from bad data, you're just going to get bad authority. Okay, so you'll break lots of stuff in doing that. So that really forced me to think, how do we do this? What would it look like? And Veronica and I have been talking about what happens if we run a session for I don't know how many weeks, maybe 12 weeks, where you take each knowledge area, you put it in the middle. Of course, data governance goes around, and then you say, how does that apply to the other knowledge areas? Because we know metadata is over everything. We know data quality is over everything. Data modeling is involved in so many things. So how can we do that across all of these different areas? And I thought it's quite interesting, and never really thought about piecing that whole puzzle together and look at the interactions and interdependencies. So today is quite a practical day, and I'm hoping that certainly Esty will ask a lot more questions. I do trust that Debbie. I do trust that Debbie is going to ask some questions, but she's been pretty. Di already. Yes, hi, Di. What's your question?
Not even a question. I'm just so glad we're thinking about putting everything in the center and considering how it interacts with everything else. It's just, and I think that's really what I wanted to stimulate.
You did?
Yeah. So
it was a bit too much, because I didn't get much sleep last night or this morning, because I was trying to put data quality in the center. So thanks, Di. I really appreciate that encouragement. It's always been nice when you, and I think a lot of the times we call ourselves data quality specialists, we call ourselves data modeling, BI, but when do we really refer to data management specialists, where we know how everything interacts? And that DM for certification course that Veronica does is probably the hardest course to learn for, because it has to deal with everything. And how do you make a course like that practical? How do you get it to communicate how these things interact? And I've seen Veronica with the 4 days. She really tries to keep it engaging and things like that, but it's not easy within those 4 days to explain how these things interact. So I'm going to put forward an approach today. I have used master data as my example, especially for Paul. I'm hoping for his arguments today. So, guys, your hand still up. Is there another observation or?
No, sorry, I'm trying to lower my hand. Okay.
Okay, no problem. You can keep on waving. Okay, so today is the DQ for data professionals, and just to share with you, we will not be meeting next week for data executives, as we will be on the road somewhere. We won't have any equipment. Nothing will be set up, so please bear with us, and on the 7th of October, we start again. I'm sure Debbie will notify everybody. All right, so let's go through the essential concepts very quickly. I do believe they're important, and I'd like to just keep on reinforcing them. And again, guys, ask questions if you don't understand some of these concepts. And I need to apologize to Veronica. I pushed them to get the DQ mind map, and it arrived on Tuesday, and I haven't put it into the deck. And I just realized that when I clicked on essential concepts. So Veronica and Andrew, my apologies. It will come for the CDOs. Okay, so here is our DQ, how to do data quality management across all the different areas. And we know that in every single one of these areas, it's going to have an impact. So for example, when we're planning data, business requirements, business data strategy, all the different strategies, we know that we should be vetting and applying data quality to those areas. Okay, these are some of the principles on data quality. Criticality, we keep on talking about that. You should never let that one go. Lifecycle management, understanding exactly where the data is and what stage of the life cycle and what's appropriate. Prevention rather than cure. You don't want to be Mr. Fix-It, you want to be Mr. Prevent-It. So let's not spend our life fixing problems. Let's rather prevent the problems. Root cause, data governance, objectives. So those are all the different principles that we have, and it's good to be able to talk to all of those areas. How do we identify critical data? We spoke on the different areas. This is one where we feel that the business strategy and the business measurement framework is important for us to help us steer the critical data definitions. But of course, there's things like regulatory reporting, financial reporting, and master data. That's always crucial in terms of the elements. But what are the most critical elements of a master data domain? Maybe just a quick question. Esti, what would you say the most critical data elements of a master data domain are?
That there is only one source of the truth. You go to one place.
Yeah, that's certainly as a domain, you'd go to one place, but within that domain, what would we recognize as critical data elements in that domain?
So it's more the definition of critical of you can't live without it. Like if you need to email your customers and you don't have their email address.
Yes, correct.
That's a problem.
Yeah. So if we think of master data, if you need to do a match and merge, if you can't match on a proper business key, you're going to get duplicates or you're going to get no data in. So your business keys and almost those attributes that are defined as part of your matching algorithm and your linking algorithm, those are the elements that you need to pay attention to. Okay, so critical data elements are applied all over the place. These are our data quality dimensions. We've spoken about them. Those were the trends we spoke about. These, we had a nice chat yesterday, last night, on the different dimensions with the different concepts and the metrics. So with a dimension and a concept, what's the metric? And then we also spoke about the data quality rules, what causes problems, how do we do data profiling? And at this point, I said to Paul last night, that's really easy. You can just find a script on the internet and run it, and you'll get a profile of all your data. And Paul said, that would be really helpful, Howard. Can you show me, or can you give it to me? And I said, yes, certainly. And then I thought, maybe I should get it and just make sure it still works. Because I'd done a whole lot of work on it, and I wasn't sure whether it was still usable. I think that was 2012, SQL 2012. So today I spent making sure that it works so I can show Paul. So these are the DQ activities, and remember we broke them down to say this is what the data manager does. We then said the data citizen, and that was a really exciting one. I'm so convinced that the data citizen sets the expectations, sets the rules for us, and then we have to deliver, and then we have to establish the truth. But without the data citizen, we're nowhere, and we can define a whole lot of interesting data, but not sure where it goes. So that's sort of where the data citizen is. And then the data management professional, he needs to understand how to do most of those activities, typically not that involved in setting up the organization and stuff like that, but he's the doer, he's getting things done. And then we have the deliverables. So we've got data, we've got profiling, we've got procedures, reports, and policies and guidelines. Okay, so that's what we need to do as data quality professionals. We need to look after these areas. Okay, so we spoke about managing the trust. Now and then executing the trust, expecting the trust. That was the citizens, and now we're going on to achieving trust. So we've spoken all about this trust. All of the managers have promised that everyone's gonna have wonderful data and trustworthy data, and it's now up to us to actually achieve this trust. So how do we do it? How do we just go from having, excuse the French, crappy data to having data that everyone loves? How do we get there? Okay, so I think we achieve trust by paying attention to the most essential concepts of DQ. Now, it's a bit of an oxymoron when you've got essential concepts and now you're having most essential concepts, but I think these are the three areas that as data quality specialists, we need to know backwards. So how do we profile the data? How do we let the data speak to us and show the business how bad the data is? They probably have a good understanding of the fact that they're getting data that's giving them the wrong answers in terms of BI, but what is causing the problem? What is the underlying or the root cause of it? Then understanding the data quality principles, and the last is how do we apply these DQ dimensions to data and other knowledge areas? All right. So how do we, now that we've got all these fancy dimensions, and I must admit, I mean, that was something that really struck me when I first read the DMBOK, was the fact that there were now 12 dimensions that I could be a lot more specific about, and I could measure those dimensions a lot, and I could measure the data according to those dimensions a lot better, and I could explain what was wrong with it. I was given a framework, a standard to apply to DQ, because up until then, being a good BI developer, all I was interested in is, does it match the source? Okay, does my data that I've received, does it match the source? If it matches the source and my dimensions are properly linked, then I've done the data quality job. Now, unfortunately, the source was unreliable in a lot of cases, and then I started to realize there's a lot more to this DQ than met the eye. So here is, I've got two scripts that I think you should look at. There's a really nice one called Implementing a Data Quality Monitoring Framework and Process on a Redgate. And then this one is the one that I'm using at the moment, which is data profiling with T-SQL. And it's SQL, on SQL Server Sentry, you'll be able to get the slides and stuff like that. Now, the nice thing is when I ran this profile, and I must admit it took me a while to get working because my data set had something like 250 columns, and it ran out of, because it was using dynamic SQL, it just ran out of space. There was a limit to the amount of dynamic SQL that I could execute with the way it was implemented. So I had to fix it this morning. But how nice is this, where you can run it, you can put it in Excel, you can right click and then look at the profile. Okay, so just to show you that I'm not making it up, here's my Excel that I had, and if I go to the data and look at my queries and connections, if I then go and edit my DQ profile, and this is something that we did yesterday, we actually spoke about. Oh dear. Okay, there we go. there we can see that change type with time. Sorry, I changed it. Come on. Just wanting to demo.
Howard, I think literally all of us have been there, where you demo something and it's like really it was working, and then when somebody's watching, it just doesn't.
It breaks. There we go. Okay. So nice thing about this is, of course, it's unique. It's unique for a column name, and that's something that you know we have to look at when we profile database. What could be our business key, and you want to have a look at those that have distinct values and unique values, and that makes sense because it should be unique at a column level. Then we get our data length, the data type, the minimum data length, the maximum data length, and we get all of this analysis and ratios that come from this profile. What was the minimum date? What was the maximum date? The number of distinct values, no zero length, percentages in terms of this. And so there's a whole lot of information that we get with, and then what is zero lengths? You know, so how many elements have got zero lengths? Okay, so that was a great test that we did, and I could then build this thing in terms of, now I understand my data, I can have a look at the information. Now what this profiling script does is it picks up all the metadata of the source table, it looks at the table definition for holding the required profiling data, so you can actually profile your data on a daily basis and then go and have a look at the results of that data. Especially, you can define your critical data elements and just look at those ones. And you can build your DQM reports that they were talking about. And so you can process only the critical data elements, or you can process all of the columns. Detect if you could use any foreign keys. Perform profile calculations, ratios, percentages. Suggest potential changes to your data. And then there's an elementary domain analysis. So that's what the script provides out the box. And now if you have the advanced options, we can do a domain analysis for reference data to see whether this would be a good candidate to do reference data on. We can look at the upper and lower thresholds, which records are there. So when we have a domain analysis and most of our records are sitting with one value, you start asking the question is, why are they all clustered around this area and what's the use of that element? Then we have null percentages, so how many of your fields, your column rows are null, and then we have variance. Okay, so if you've got an integer or a big int and it could be converted to an int or a small int, it will actually warn you of some of these things. Now, I've used this quite a lot when operating as a DBA. People give me a data model, and then I ask them, why did you choose a big int? Or why did you choose varchar max? And the answer is, well, we weren't sure what the limits are, so we just chose the biggest one. And so some of the thinking we go into the data formats and the data typing is pretty weak. Okay, so if you look at the script, and these are just the parameters, it basically says, here is my critical data elements, my column list. Okay, must I analyze all the text? Must I analyze all the numeric data? And then all the data columns, the data type columns, and then look at large objects, varchar max, analyze what's inside them, do the advanced analytics, look at distinct values, which records are on the boundaries. I sort of showed you that. And there you see right at the end here is it runs this domain analysis, but only on those columns that have less than 200 distinct values. Okay, and it shows you a distribution of those values to do a DQ assessment that you'd want to do and understand the quality of that. Okay, so this is the data quality, the data profiling data model. I have a dictionary on the data that I'm working with. We get Lloyd's messages. We get message formats and layouts. So fortunately for me, I've got a good dictionary. It tells me what the order of the field should be, what the name is, what the description, a nice business glossary, what the data types are, is it mandatory, what the validation rules are, and that's in my dictionary. Now, we should be doing this for all our data, not just for when you have a definition from Lloyd's, but everyone should have a dictionary on their data. This is a table that contains a domain analysis. So it's a column domain analysis. So by column name, what are the elements, and then what is the percentage distribution of those elements within that domain. And then these are the results of the DQ profile, the table scheme, which is database, name, column name, and then these are the results that come out on that scenario. Okay, so this is what the results look like of the data set that I profiled. And you can see here are all the different fields, like I've got a UMR, market reference, a syndicate reference, broker pseudonyms, business categories. I can see what the length is, and the nice thing now is I can see, well, the specification said 15, but the maximum I ever get was 12. And then I've got insured, and these are the different lengths. So I can go down the lengths and say, oh, you want this layout or you want this format, but what I'm seeing in the data is a different definition. Now, of course, you've got to deal with the extreme case, so that may not all be valid, but it's a great benefit to your assessment of the data. So now we can see here's the average data length. What is the minimum dates and maximum dates? So when you build your dimension, your calendar dimension, you can understand what you need to support. Your number of distinct values, your no zero length, and then you've got percentages of zero length. So how many are zeros? And so, for example, in some cases, none of them are zeros. And then at the limit, and can this be a foreign key, and can you have combinations? So with very little work, you're able to get an amazing amount of insight as to what this data asset is all about. Okay, now, of course, for people like us who receive data from external parties, and you've got to process it, and we know the stuff comes in CSV or Excel, there's always problems with it. There's commas, there's a situation like that. So it's actually very helpful to run this routine on the data set when it arrives, and then to start saying, well, are there any exceptions to my dictionary? Okay, so if I've got a field that's of 105 and my dictionary is saying it's 100, don't do the import now. Don't convert it to your table, because you're going to break. The table's going to break. You're going to have a truncate, a string truncate when you go through that process. So nice way to analyze your data, very helpful. And then I really liked analyzing the different fields. So percentage zero length. So what we're saying is, of the complete universe of that column, what percentage of these columns are at a zero length or have a maximum of zero length? Now we can see these rows, for example, a column NKN is 100% zero, where they got zero length. So all of these columns are somewhat meaningless to us. Now, of course, this is my universe. This may not be the complete universe, so I can't make the assumption that because it's zero, I don't need to worry about it. I'm not getting any valuable data. But I can see almost the quality of the data that I'm getting in. And things like this that I mean, if a lot of these messages are about claims, and I don't have a catastrophe code in terms of what caused the claim, you start asking yourself questions like, how are they communicating this? Anyway, but what was nice was when I filtered to just my critical data elements, hardly any of them had a percentage of zero length. So you can see here that my data is pretty clean, or my critical data is pretty clean. Unfortunately, the syndicate reference is one of the really critical elements, and I've got some missing data there. So in that situation, I would need to reject the file. But I need to give evidence as to why I rejected it. Here is the evidence. and I just need to show the data, and I build a DQM report, and I say, guys, this is why this file's been rejected. So ETL developers, BI guys, it's so helpful to have this, because if you fail, it's going to be your problem until you can prove to them that somebody sent you that lovely data that we keep on referring to. All right, so what was also nice was the ability to look at my critical data elements and look at the distinct values. So which of those values were giving me the most distinct elements? And here we can see we're a little bit worried about the syndicate number, but then in talking to the data citizen, or the lady that was running it, a lady by the name of Marie, she said, no, that's not a problem because we don't support a lot of syndicates. Normally the messages are just for 1 or 2 syndicates. And you can go through the discussion and understand what's happening. Okay, so really nice to have this presented to the data citizen saying, this is what I'm seeing in the data. Are you in agreement with it? And are we happy with it? But you can keep on running it, right? So it can run in the background and you can see this every day. When I did a domain analysis, sorry,
Howard, this is really great because this can help big data sets really help you ask very specific pointed questions.
Yeah.
And not a general question like, is this important, or how much is this important? You can then show, like with the syndicate one, specifically ask that and get a response on that. This is really great. It's cool.
Yeah, so I think last week we actually spoke about the data citizen interview checklist in terms of what are the questions that they need to ask. And it's really helpful when you have something like this to say, well, what is the impact of a LPSO number being blank? Right? What is the impact? And if we have that, interestingly enough, one of the rules is that if I can't find a policy, I need to try use the LPSO number to find the original policy. So there were some really nice discussions we could have with the users in terms of understanding that data and then showing to them that we've got some challenges. Here are my business categories, and these are the different types and then of course the distribution. Okay, now the one thing that I found interesting and great for DBAs or data modelers is it now starts to put some suggestions. So we're saying 5 of the fields have few distinct elements, and it's potential a better idea to create a reference data table and link it as a foreign key. So here are the different suggestions that it makes to you in the end, and this is one where it says it seems empty. Is it required? We've got few distinct values, and these are the fields, as I showed you earlier on, with that 0% that's got nothing there. So are these elements required in our data? Okay, are there any questions on that data profiling? Observations? Paul, you wanted the script. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you, Howard. It's nice to have a script. And I think it's, as you talked about yesterday, you can have the basic stats come out and so on, but that next step is so important. When you spoke to Marie and so on, that's when you only really get to the bottom of the details and facilitate that discussion with the users. Right. You still need to do that, and that's this sort of just gives you some teeth, right? It gives you it gives you some hard things to talk, not hard, solid content to talk about, as opposed to just theoretical. And so that's cool.
Yeah. And I think it's probably helpful to them because they probably haven't seen any of these insights about their data before. They've probably never seen it. They get given a specification, but what the data looks like when it arrives, they because they're not technical, they don't really get involved in the parsing of the data, loading it, and bringing it into the system. And then they start asking questions: why isn't this here? And what happened there? So, it's really nice for them to have that insight and then to monitor it, of course. Okay, so we've sort of and within master data, if you don't profile your potential systems of record, I think you're heading for a big explosion and a disaster where someone just says this is the right one. You go and build all your integration, you build all your publications and stuff like that, and then you realize the data is useless and it doesn't support your needs. That's probably a more depressing element of master data. You just don't want to create an authoritative source that nobody trusts. Paul Bolton.
How's things? Maybe a dumb question speaking to all the professionals around, but
there's only one dumb question, Paul.
And that's the one that I don't ask, correct?
Yes, correct.
So profiling, is that, I mean, it's, I think it's awesome. Like even just thinking of the work I used to do in business analysis, and needing to provide you guys with a level of technical spec.
Yeah.
Profiling, is that done at a specification stage, or is it a continuous process in the run of data from that system all the time? Do you run the profiling before you dump, or is it, or once you've profiled, you sort of trust it and then do it ad hoc?
No. I mean, data goes dirty overnight. And it's a little bit like losing your money. I really like that one comparison to say, when you walk a tightrope, you get an immediate feedback that things are a little bit wobbly and shaky under your feet. Now, when it's similar situation with your money is you do the budget and then you forget about it and then you realize that you've overspent and then you get into trouble. And that's why the finance people constantly monitor their budget. What we don't do so well in data management is constantly looking at the state of our data regularly, like at least every night, have your targets set so that you can build exception reports and you don't just show everything, but you want to have a report the next day as to what the state of your quality is. And even when you refresh your dashboard from BI, you want to tell the people, guys, this is the level of quality of the data that you're going to make decisions on. And if it's gone below a certain target, they make those decisions at their own peril and own risk.
All right.
So it should never stop. If we think of that cycle, plan, do, check, act, or plan, do, I can't even remember that thing now. You go around in that circle continuously. You understand the problems, you attempt to fix the problems, you then continually fix them and monitor them, and then you plan again, and you go around in the circles that you got to go through. So you got to establish that cycle.
So that cycle also obviously keep validating your rule set, right? So that if you need to adjust,
yes.
You can do it right there.
Correct, because you're going to remember your data quality expectations that your data citizen expresses to you must be translated into a set of business rules that are executable. And sometimes when we kick things out, we've got to go and review, well, is that rule too strict? Is it too loose because it's allowing rubbish to come in? What's the state of our rules? So it's not just what's the state of our data, what's the state of our quality rules and expectations.
No, good. No, I thought, you run the profiling once and then you build the rules, and the built rule in your ETL or your transfer of data process would then spit out the exceptions, but didn't realize we'd use this continuously. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you never stop. You never stop on the quality cycle. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
You're wanting to see the moving, Paul. So remember, when you start with it, and especially if you're bringing in new data, you may start with everything's fine and it looks all nice, and then things go bad over time, and you're picking up those anomalies. Now, who's going to tell you that if you're not monitoring the data?
100%. Cool.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
All right, so let's start now. What we're suggesting is the other part is putting data quality in the middle, and then how does it affect all the other areas? So I just wanted to show you the sort of things that this is what I've done. I've taken just 3 dimensions. So here's data quality, and these are my 3 dimensions, and I've broken them up into dimension, concept, and let's see if I can make this bigger. I can see Dia's Okay, so remember that one diagram that I showed you. Here is accuracy. The one concept is it agrees with the real world. My metric there is what I refer to as a universe accuracy. So, have we dealt with the universe of values, or are we dealing with a small percentage of the real world? So we may be very good at one segment of our customer market, but we're ignoring other segments, which may change. So we need what's referred to as a universe accuracy. The business rule type is a value domain, but it's now applied at the universe level. And then we've got another concept of dimension, which is matched to agreed source. And then we've got source accuracy and we've got provenance accuracy. So I'm sure you guys have heard about that. One is looking at the source data and is it accurate? And the other one is looking at the people that are providing it. And are they doing a good job at maintaining the accuracy of their data set? Because, yeah, we can balance to their data set 100%, but have they updated it with a later set of changes? Are they managing that properly? So we've got these different business rules. This one is related to credibility. And then, for example, when I apply this to reference data and master data, I'm now saying, what is the accuracy of my business requirements? All right. And remember, the very first thing you do in master data is understand or define the master data, the business requirements. So what is the accuracy of those requirements? What is the ownership and stewardship style when I'm looking at provenance? Who are going to be those people that own the data that I can go and get the data from? So a good example of that is if I'm going to choose a system of record and there is no owner and there is no steward and I have a problem and I say, please fix, who am I going to say it to? Am I going to have to talk to IT to try and fix it? And when I don't have any accountability for that data, I'm going to get into trouble. Okay, so my universe is then modeled by my subject area. My accuracy is on a canonical model, and what do my subject matter experts look like for that domain? What credibility do they have? Integration patterns on that. I can look at the taxonomies and ontologies. I can look at publish and subscribe, registry, hub and spoke, and then I can look at my system of record stakeholders. And so I go in terms of every single one of these areas of that system of record. If I'm going to choose that as a data acquisition system of record, how does it represent the universe? Okay, if it's only giving me a small percentage, I'm probably going to have to go and look for data somewhere else. And then what is my selection criteria that I want to use on a data source? So if I'm going to choose a data source, does it have to adhere to timeliness? Does it have to adhere to accuracy, consistency, completeness? How do I select? What DQ dimensions do I use to select a system of record? Okay. Now, once I've got it into the authoritative source, I can compare my values to the different system of records to make sure that I'm in line. And then once I've got all this stuff, then we start providing data services, right? So the master data system and reference data needs to provide a data service. So how well is this in terms of accessibility, data sharing? What is the utilization of my data service? And so I can look at measuring how I'm doing with the provision of those that data, and those are my deliverables. So these are my core deliverables that I have within the reference and master data knowledge area. So that was, let me just, okay, so this is the idea. And I must admit, I didn't get, this wasn't Howard Diesel's brainwave. When Steve Hoberman gave the course and I went there for the first time, I had looked at a data model scorecard before I got there, but I was blown away by the scorecard. And as I teach the scorecard on data modeling, I start to find some amazing things of how complete is the model. Well, I've got a DQ dimension called completeness. How consistent is the model? Well, I've got a DQ dimension there as well. How well does the metadata match the data? What is the understandability? So it's like, my goodness, I can take DQ and apply it to any deliverable. And you know what? It's actually not so weird, because I then did a metadata management scorecard, and one of the things is quality within my metadata. And I have to understand what are the dimensions, how accurate is my metadata in explaining my data set, or has it gone out of date? So this is the sort of how to apply DQ to any knowledge area. First of all, identify the deliverables and the techniques, then understand your P3T. Once you've understood that, you can go and define a deliverable scorecard using your DQ dimensions. Okay, so this is where I'm really excited. Debbie, yes.
Hi, what is P3T?
Debbie, this was specifically for you. It's this new teenage way of writing. It's understand your pets.
Understand your pets? I'm still a teenager.
No, it actually stands. Sorry about that. I should have written it out. Acronyms galore. It's principles, policies, procedures, and technology. So there's 3 P's and a T.
Oh, I see. Thank you so much. But
All
I do
right.
like pets as well.
You do like pets as well, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let's have a look at. I'm just going to use master data just to give you an example. Here are my key deliverables and my consumers, and then these are my key processing steps. So this is part of Paul's course that he's doing. It is defined in the DMBOK, but Paul's put a fancy visualization on. And basically the key processing steps for master data, please remember it's not the same as for reference data, is the data model management, then data acquisition, data validation, standard and enrichment, entity resolution, and then data sharing and stewardship. So you remember I said, there were all my deliverables. Data acquisition is what I refer to as once I've established a system of record, I then get my data. I get the data from my system of record, and then we go through the validation and resolution. Okay, so we've got that, and I just want to, before I get too far in that, I just wanted to give you a quick update on your pets. This is you, and I certainly feel, and unfortunately the DMBOK actually defines these right at the end, so it's almost the very last step. I feel that these things should be defined before you start doing data quality. What are our principles, what are our policies and our procedures? So it looks something like this, and you typically start off at a policy and then you hone in and you're getting more and more specific to a point where you're getting guidelines and best practice or community of practice, you're getting a better definition, and these are discretionary, but these are mandatory. Why am I doing it? What do I need to do? How do I do it? Okay, so this is the progression on your P3T. This is what we teach in data governance to show you how to build all these policy frameworks and principles and stuff like that. Okay, now what struck me when I was doing this was a case of saying, when I set up a policy, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish controls and a process so that my deliverable or my output adheres to the standard. Okay, similar to our data, similar to all the work we do in data management, I need to have standards so that when an individual produces a data management deliverable, I can say, does it compare to the standard? If it doesn't, please go and redo it. These are where your problems are. And really the best way of doing that is what I find as my scorecard, my data model scorecard, my reference data and master data scorecard, my metadata scorecard. And we institute proactive controls, concurrent controls, and then these are what we refer to as our playbooks. And then we must keep on giving feedback to the guidelines and the procedures, right? So when we see people making the same mistake, we've got to feed it back and we've got to correct it. So here's an example of the type of stuff we do, typically done by data governance, but people within the different other areas should understand them. Okay, so this is an example of what I've done, applying it to reference data and master data. And what I've done is just taken the top 3, accuracy, completeness, and consistency, And I spoke a lot about agreeing with the real world and the matching to agreed source. Now, completeness has some more than what I've looked more and more at it. So, are we complete at a column level? Are we complete at a row level? Are we complete at a table level? And are we complete at a schema level? So, when we're talking about our schemas, do we have all of our concepts covered? Okay, don't just focus on the data that you have, but focus on what the data is required, and do we have our schema populated, or do we have problems that we would pick up in a data strategy to say the business are battling in this area, and we realize we haven't been paying attention to that concept. These are the metrics. So, for example, what is the sparseness of a table? How well is it populated? Or logical completeness do we have elements of it that are fully complete, or subset of attributes? And that's sort of where we go through it, and these are the type of business rules that we're applying. And here is the scorecard that I showed you, and just to give you an understanding of how I apply correctness and completeness to data modeling, we look at this data modeling, this data model that we have as a sample as part of our training, and we say, oh dear, and we get out our red pen just like teachers do, and they say we've got a problem we can't navigate between product feedback and interaction types. We were told that we weren't asked for year and quarter, so we gave more than what we needed to get, so we should scratch those away, and also these areas over here. So completeness is measured not just in terms of have you met the requirements, but if you over-deliver and you overcomplicate, then we should also ask questions on that. So this is how you do it in a data model, and that's how you do it in data modeling. And you can see here I built a Power BI scorecard where I can go through the entire deliverable, checking the quality of the deliverable. So I've got consistency, I've got readability, I've got my definitions, standards, and we can see here this was the results of a training course where I marked how well they did and how well they delivered. Okay. All right, so this is what I see in terms of the deliverable accuracy for reference and master data. So are my requirements accurate? Are my data models accurate? Do I link to industry taxonomies in terms of the integration? My system of record, does it represent my universe? The authoritative source, how does it compare what I've collected? And a good example of that is data subjects, right? So if we're building a customer master data or a party master data model, and data privacy wants to make use of it to be able to understand how many data subjects we have, and if there's a breach, I can report to all those data subjects. And I can also show if the data subject asks, what data do you have of mine? I should be able to present it as part of reference data and master data. Fantastic use of that technology to deal with some of your data privacy issues. All right. So I've taken every single one of these concepts, accuracies, and I've mapped them onto reference data, compare the values, and then I've done completeness. So at a column, what's my count populated? Do I have a value presence? And on the other side now, I can look at, for my system of records, what's the value domain in terms of reference data? What is my golden record completeness? Now, people have constantly been saying, let's get away from the term golden record because that almost implies it's just one table, and we now refer to it as a golden profile. So, but when I'm looking at a row level, I can talk about a golden record completeness. Okay. And then we do a concept completeness, and then we do a domain completeness. So again, we can keep on checking ourselves. And when we provide a data service, so this is a service that we provide to downstream people, well, we're going to be able to publish reference data. We're going to be able to provide real-time online lookups against the source. What is your code list being? We're able to provide master data lookups. We can publish dimensions. We can provide applications with configuration data. And when we look at a schema, we can actually build our enterprise data warehouse with all of the data that's sitting within the domain. So that's how I would check my data service. Are we able to publish all the master and reference data to our enterprise data warehouse? Are we complete at a schema level? Okay, we've then got consistency. These are the different elements. Do we have a logical consistency? Do we have format consistency? Do we have temporal consistency over time? And do we have equivalence of distributed data? So we're now talking about concept versioning when it comes to temporal. Formats are attribute harmony. And we can see here that we want our format requirements coming from the business. We want the format validation. We want harmonization. And we want a metadata registry so that anybody producing a data model or setting up an application, they should be able to get the definitions from reference and master data. They should be. That's a service that we should be able to provide. Of course, we should be able to provide slowly changing dimensions to the BI, and that's in terms of temporal consistency. And then the last one that I did was, this is a summary of all of those different areas. And that's it. I'm just about right on time. I think Paul took too much of my time in the beginning, but any questions, any comments, observations? I see there's one comment from Esti, I think. Oh, thank you. It's I think it's it's what I learned when I worked with the Zachman framework is when you break it down into those cells and who, what, where, why, that forces that you have to drill down and look at all of these different elements. And you're always finding it helpful to get a framework that will give you that ability to deal with all the different concepts that you need to deal with when applying data quality to reference data, to BI, to metadata. You need to have that scope to be able to look at the things that.
Yeah, and it's nice and structured. It's not you have this huge big thing to complete.
Yeah.
You can start somewhere and you can finish somewhere as well.
Yeah, and remember what we do in data quality, one of the things we take straight off, and I remember Di talking about, is choosing your dimensions. What are appropriate dimensions for your company at this point in time?
Yeah, the whole fit for purpose thing.
Yeah.
Which to me was like just everywhere after it started getting mentioned here. Like it just pops up everywhere in different formats.
Yeah, agreed. Di, does that sort of scratch the sort of interaction and the integration?
I didn't expect that level of detail, I'm sure. No, maybe she did. Di, you're on mute.
If I may just add, I mean, John Zachman, what, how, where, who, when, and why. It's my favorite framework ever. But just to think back at the data profiling, I never underestimate the value of the rules.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, I think, profiling tells you as it is. That's what the data actually looks like.
Yeah.
And the rules, if you evaluate against the rules, tells you what it should be. So for me, the rules, and I follow Ronald Ross in his understanding of business rules and data rules. And that's a discipline I follow. But the two together tell us that's what it is, and this is how it should be. Yeah. And we need both of them as data management professionals.
Yep. And we need to apply it almost to every single knowledge area.
Yes.
That's we got to ensure that we have quality deliverables right from the front, and we're able to validate or check and score the level of deliverables that we are providing.
Well, Howard, I remember I had to evaluate a whole load of deliverables, and it was data models and so on. And all I did was I took our data quality dimensions, and I said, is this data model complete?
Yeah.
And I asked the questions, are all the entities there, or what's missing? And is it accurate? Is it understandable?
Yeah.
So these are so useful to us in every aspect of our Dharma Dimbok framework.
Yeah. And I suppose that's why they refer to it as a foundational component.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the foundation of all of those.
Yeah.
Paul, you were going to say something?
I'm unmuted. Yeah, I really like the way that you've, towards the end, how you've applied the dimensions to the different aspects of the master data.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, like most of your things, you have to kind of go through it slowly and actually just apply your mind to know, okay, which ones of those things will be really important for me to do now, and then to find ways to actually measure that. It might not always be that easy to do, but I really like the rigor that goes into that.
And I think
that was really good.
What we've learned from Steve Hoberman was you start scoring it. All right, so we could then say, for example, one area is 5 out of 100, and then that will have the outcome of people not paying so much attention to it right now. If we mark certain areas in terms of accuracy of our data and completeness as almost 30% and 30%, you got 60% of the focus being on accuracy and completeness. So you can change behavior by allocating a weighting to what's important to you in terms of a good quality master data system, a reliable master data, which is the net result.
Yeah, I mean, what I was thinking of is consistency. Okay, and in this context, I mean, are the values consistent from one system to the other, right? So,
yeah,
I was thinking,
that's the equivalence of distributed data.
Yeah, and I was just thinking how that would be a really good one to have, but that would be very tricky to do as well. Like you mentioned, what did you call it? Universe representation.
Yeah,
I like that. It's sort of on the one level you have to ask when you look at your models and so on, does it actually describe how my world works?
Yeah,
but
and that's why
how the universe representation.
Yeah. And that's why I added the canonical model. The canonical model is so powerful at that, in terms of taking each system and mapping it to your universe model, and looking at then the ability to compare models of different systems and looking at the equivalence. So canonical modeling is something that we don't do a lot of because of its complexity, but it's sort of helpful in the preparation and the planning phases of your sources.
Yeah, what I just realized today that I haven't made that connection before, but those two things together, on the one hand, from a scoping perspective, is this how my world works on a modeling perspective? Then you bring in the representation of the universe. That's so the one says, I've sufficiently modeled my little village, to make sure that I will be able to deliver a solution. The universe representation is, okay, to fill this village, do I have the right sources and so on to get complete coverage for what I want to represent in my system? I thought that was a useful construct.
Yep. Yeah, so it's part of that thing of creeping up on it. And so how do we do it in small iterations, but also knowing what that universe may look like at some stage?
Right. Cool.
Excellent. Any other questions? Everyone was quiet today, and I thought I'd made it quite practical, or hands-on is the right term.
I mean, just for me. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot to absorb, and I'm wondering, you know, this is part of the service you provide. This is a service that we would engage you to come in and do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of IP here.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I mean, it's you go through these things very fast, and you often use the words, "I'm sure you've heard about this or that." I'm like, actually, I don't think I have. Yeah, it's just good. You know, it's a lot of content to go through. But that's why, for me, it's like, okay, take these things, go through it slowly, and how does it actually apply to my life?
Yeah, and realize that connectivity between our knowledge areas is possible.
Yeah.
That's Esty.
Yes, it's more just a comment. Like, also, this is very helpful for me for the workshop prep as well, for adding these trust and data quality dimension discussion part of the narrative in. So this is very helpful, useful for me as well.
And you know, I was talking to Veronica yesterday after Paul is punishing us every day from 6 until 9 at night. And one of the things we keep talking about is to get that master's level, you have to have a good understanding of the interaction between knowledge areas. And of course, where the world is going and some practical application. And it really stimulates that talk and discussion when you start understanding the crossover between these areas and not just focus one chapter at a time in terms of the DMBOK. And it's that age-old saying is that the sum of the parts, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
So the whole universe is much bigger than just DQ on its own, DA, DM, all those different areas. The whole of data management is much larger than that. There's so many of the interactions and the dynamics that make it different.
Yeah. For sure. And if you're missing one, it's like missing a bigger piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Happy to share Excels, happy to share the scorecards, Power BI, the decks, of course. So happy to share that with you guys.
Should keep all that stuff for your clients and maybe DAMA South Africa members only.
Yeah. Specifically.
You're too generous with your IP.
We'll hand it over.
I get it. You want to get people hooked on your Coke. But.
Yeah. Guys, anybody else with questions? I know Jan's there. He hasn't asked. Mabel hasn't asked any questions. Normally she asks lots of questions in the master data course.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
I just need to listen to the video again because there's so much content. Yeah, the thoroughness is just amazing.
Okay.
Well, I just want to confirm that one, Howard. You took my breath away on this one. Thanks.
Oh.
Too much to learn.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Excellent.
Romance
Guys,
isn't dead.
Sorry, Debs?
I said romance isn't dead. You're still taking your Hans breath away.
I'm trying to look after your pets, Debbie.
Sure.
All yours, Paul Bolton.
Howard, Mark gave me a great idea. I'm going to set up a PayFast link for people to entry fee into the sessions. Cool.
Yes. That's a good idea. And Paul, of course, you are the keeper. You're the keeper of the pay gate, right? So
yeah,
I must just speak to you about that.
Okay, cool.
As long as we can drink wine and have a few beers, everything else is rosy.
Sure, that hasn't happened for so long. You can't have wine and beer and then go present an MDM course. So I can poor Mabel, he won't forgive me. And
yeah, that's for sure.
Z.
All right.
So anyway.
So instead of a
Excellent.
podcast link out, I'll set up a Menti saying, "Do you have wine or beer ready?" Then we can start. Cool. Great.
Cool.
Thanks again, everybody. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
I've already got a few people asking me for recordings, so thank you for that. Please drop a note on LinkedIn to Debbie or on the post when you see it, and we'll be sure to send you the copy of the recording. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.